Godwin's law, for those who don't know it, in my description, and feel free to correct me, was a slightly tongue-in-cheek, facetious law slash meme that Mike came up with many years ago in sort of pre-internet times.
Well, pre-my internet.
Pre-your internet, pre-web, certainly pre-web times, to express something that he noticed was happening in various forums online, which is that if some of you haven't noticed or haven't spent much time online, which is probably unlikely given this crowd, when a conversation happens online where people get emotional and heated, the conversation sometimes, just sometimes, will sort of spiral out of control a little bit. And Mike very astutely noticed a at least somewhat disturbing pattern and decided to note a law which was effectively, and again, feel free to correct me if I don't get this quite right, as a conversation on the internet or a computer network, since it was sort of pre-internet when you first created it, continues and gets larger and longer, the probability that someone will compare something or someone in the conversation to Hitler and or the Nazis rapidly approaches 1. So as it happens, you are more and more likely to have someone get angry enough and emotional enough to call the person that they're arguing with or the person that they're defending either the equivalent of Hitler or the Nazis. Is that
that's a pretty good summary. There's a Wikipedia entry on it, which I did not write, but which seems to be pretty accurate, which actually quotes, I said the probability approaches 1. Why didn't I say the probability approaches 100%, which is a little more Englishy? And the answer is, I wanted it to sound more scientific.
Right.
But it's not science. It's not actually a scientific prediction. It's meant to sound like science. And the idea here was that if people realized that they were just falling into an easy rut or to an easy, cheap, glib comparison to the Holocaust or the Nazis, then something had gone wrong. And my goal was to make people be more self-aware that they were escalating comparisons and using maybe inappropriate, historical, excessive, hyperbolic tropes to insult the person who disagreed with them, about whether, John Kerry was right or the Swift voters were right or whatever.
Important to note that in a very cool way, effectively, I think Godwin's law is somewhat self-correcting. The fact that as more people sort of know about it and learn about it, you have sort of two things happen. One is that they avoid making those sort of glib historical comparisons, which tend to really derail generally already off-rails conversations, but they begin to think about it more and recognize it. But the second thing is that you have other people who know about Godwin's law and sort of police it. So as soon as someone now makes a reference to, a sort of Holocaust or Nazi reference in an online conversation where it's inappropriate, people will immediately point out Godwin's law, and it sort of is a way of kind of diffusing that line of discussion and generally keeps conversations a little bit more in line, at least in my experience.
Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the ties between Israel and the American Jewish establishment are very strong, and they are strong in this country. As you know, they have power, which It's okay, they are talented people and they have power, money and media and other things. And their attitude is Israel, my country, right or wrong, the identification. And they are not ready to hear criticism. And it's very easy to blame people who criticize certain acts of the Israeli government as anti-Semitics and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people. And that justify everything we do to the Palestinians.
Certainly, if you are talking about the history of the Third Reich, you get to bring up Hitler or Nazis. Right. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. And you should bring them up because it's hard to talk about the Third Reich without doing that. But the other thing is, I think, more recently, unpleasantness in Charlottesville, there were people actually using using a little bit of Nazi symbology, and it was appropriate to call those people Nazis. They're self-identifying as white nationalists. A lot of them were. And it's appropriate to be appropriately critical of that kind of excess. And nothing, since I'm a free speech advocate and Mike is a free speech advocate, we support your right to make any comparison you want. But at the same time, because we're free speech advocates, we would like people to think a little more carefully about the kinds of things that they say online.